Joining me now is retired senior FBI profiler Mary Ellen O'Toole. And on set with me in New York is former homicide prosecutor Matt Murphy. Matt, I'd like to start with you. The DA didn't link Heuermann to this latest victim today, but he did say he was getting DNA testing. What's he going to do?
Well, what's interesting about the DNA here is this is familial DNA. So this is kind of the latest in DNA technology.
That's how they identified her.
That's right. So that's what's interesting about it. Is this is one of the first big cases where they identify a victim through familial DNA. Usually it's the perpetrator or the suspect that they're doing. So this is something that one way or another will bring some sense, hopefully, of justice to her family. There's a couple of things that I really liked about this press conference. Number one, this DA went out of his way to thank all the people behind the scenes. These are some really hardworking folks, especially in the familial DNA, because it's a lot of people don't understand it. They work very hard. It's kind of the lab coat type people. And he also went out of his way to humanize the victim here, which I think it really shows that there's some compassion here. Even though these women were all prostitutes, I think we've come a long way as a society.
But how are they connecting this? He said we're going to work to try and connect it to Rex Heuermann. They've asked for DNA from Rex Heuermann, so they're now going to what? Compare that to all evidence found on these remains? Well,
they're going to do that. I think that they're going to have a very challenging road ahead of them on that. These were skeletal remains, and this was 1996. So what's very interesting about this means that Rex Heuermann was potentially active years earlier. I mean, most of the Gilgo Beach 4 were around the 2010 time period. So if he is connected to this means that this guy has been active for a very long time.
Mary Ellen, that's exactly what I want to ask you about. This happened in 1996, 16 years before the 3 killings that Rex Heuermann has already been charged with. The MO is also significantly different. So do serial killers change the way they commit crimes?
Yes, serial killers do change, and there's 2 features to a serial killer case. You have the MO, which stands for the modus operandi, and then you have the signature of the serial killer. And we learned working hundreds of serial murder cases in the BAU that the MO can change over time, and it can change because it's too difficult to do it the same way. It can change because they've read about other cases that do it differently, but the MO will likely change. The signature will not. And the dismemberment in a case can be very difficult. And so that if this is connected to Heuermann, there could have been reasons like that he would have discontinued that behavior.
In 1996, Mary Ellen, Rex Heuermann was 32 years old. A few months after this murder, he married his wife. In general, when do serial killers begin killing?
What we've seen traditionally is in their early to mid-20s, they will start acting out. So I would suspect that if he is responsible for Karen's murder, you still want to go back in time for when he was in his 20s to look at other possible murders that he committed, especially look for what we call the practice murders. And these are murders where they learn, how do you dispose of a body? What about the weapon? What kind of victim do I want? Those practice murders are when they make mistakes. But I would suspect, looking back in his early 20s, will also identify some murders.
I've just got to ask you, in all your studies of serial killers, I mean, how unusual would it be for somebody to spontaneously start killing around 2010 and kill? He's been accused of killing 3 people, possibly 4, a prime suspect and a 4th, and then just suddenly stop. In other words, I think everybody had a hard time believing he just stopped in 2010.
Right. So you're exactly right. You look at the beginning and you look at the end. People don't just wake up, however, one morning and decide, change completely their personality and say, I'm going to become a serial killer. Now, what does that involve? So there is an evolutionary process that has to take place. But as far as a serial killer stopping, we know that happens anecdotally. So you have cases like BTK, bind, torture, kill. He stopped until he inserted himself back into his own investigation. And then you had the killer out in California over the last year who went on for years, and then he suddenly stopped. So we know it happens, but usually the reason is there are other things that are going on in their lives that force them to stop. Sometimes it's health. I've had serial killers tell me, Mary Ellen, it's just too hard. It's a lot of hard work to be a serial killer. So I had to kind of slow down.
Yeah.
And then you have family pressures as well. So anecdotally, we do know it happens.
Thanks so much for watching. Go to joinnn.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.